This weird kink in my hair, but we're going with it. Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is R.E.M. Verberg and I'm a fantasy author. I have a debut manuscript that I'm currently shopping around to different agents. I'm also working on a second novel, but in the meantime I am mainly publishing short audio stories. They are available here on my YouTube channel as well as on Podbean, Spotify and iTunes. And the podcast they're on is called Far-Fetched Stories. Now, I am aware that I'm not pronouncing that super well, Far-Fetched Stories. That's because I'm Dutch. In hindsight, I might have been better off choosing a name that I can actually pronounce correctly, but that ship has sailed, so we're going with it. Anyway, I thought it'd be nice to give you a little bit of a look behind the scenes, also give you a look at my face so you know who's behind the stories, and tell you a little bit about my current project, which is a series called The Raven's Toll. And this is actually a bi-weekly series. It's actually just a longer story cut into different episodes. It's gonna run for about 12 to 15 episodes. It's a story about a man who is forced to dwell, or an ancient being rather, who is forced to dwell in a world he once nearly destroyed, a deadly power he has sworn never to use again, and the circumstances that will lead either to his salvation or his doom. Dun dun dun. So that's a blurb, so if that sounds interesting to you, definitely tune in. I would say if you're a fan of N.K. Jemisin or Robin Hobb, and generally a fan of fantasy with a more sociological, psychological edge to it, I'd say it might be interesting for you. I hesitate to call it psychological fantasy because I don't know if that's an actual genre, and it also sounds kind of boring, which I try not to be. But yeah, that's definitely what I'm interested in. And I thought it'd be cool to tell you a little bit more also about myself and why I decided to do this, because it's pretty terrifying. I am writing this as it's already being published. The first episode came out January 21st. The second is almost out. It's February 4th. And yeah, so people are already listening while I'm not even finished with the story. So who am I and why am I doing this? Well, I've actually been a writer for over 10 years now. I always used to be a copywriter and also writing coach and do all sorts of editing jobs on the side. And fiction writing used to be something I did in my spare time. I was a little bit, not hush-hush, but also not quite embarrassed, but a little bit, I held it back. I didn't share it with the world. Kept it to myself. And I don't exactly know why. I think it's because I'm a huge perfectionist. I was always afraid that it wasn't good enough, etc., blah, blah, blah. So it took me a while to actually get to the point where I wanted to share my stories with the world and get published. So that's what I started to do last year. I came forward as a writer. That's not how you say that, but anyway. I started looking for representation. And of course, that's not automatically gonna go well. I used to always want to do the traditional route, just get published traditionally. But over last year, as I've started to know the market a little bit better, the book market and specifically the fantasy market, I've realized that my book might not be, as a debut author, it's a super commercialized market. It's a high risk market for the people that take you on. So naturally, they're gonna look for like really high concept books, and I could make a really high concept blurb for my book, but that would not be true to the book. And I could write a really high concept book, but that's not what I want to write. So what I've realized is I might be better off exploring more indie publishing options, and in general options to get my stories out there before you, a fantasy enthusiast, hopefully, if you're clicking on this video, for you to enjoy and just have cut out the middleman, kind of that idea. So as I had been querying for a little bit and getting kind of frustrated with what was happening, or rather at that point not so much happening, my boyfriend, who's also a fantasy author, suggested to me that I maybe start writing some short stories, just to sort of give people a taste of what my writing's like. And I remember thinking, I don't know, is there a market for that? Short fantasy stories, who's gonna read those? Now I know people actually read those, but I did not know that at the time. So yeah, I was sitting on that idea, and then one day I was at work. I also work at a soap workshop. That's a story for another day. But I was talking to my colleague about it, and sort of together we came to this kind of epiphany moment of, oh, you should do audio stories, because audiobooks are really popular and it's really easy for people to get into. It's free. You can listen to it on your commute or when you're traveling or whenever. So I thought, yeah, that's a really good idea. Let's try that. So I started Farfetched Stories in September and quickly established this collaboration with my longtime online friend, Diana Moore. I knew that she was interested in doing podcasts, but I didn't know that she was that good at reading stories and sort of, I don't know, bringing them to life, which has been amazing. So she became my sort of go-to collaborator for the stories. And after about 4 of them, I started to feel like, yeah, I can do this, I can deliver, I can get them out on time, write them, edit them on time, and this is really fun also. That's a really important thing. So then I started reevaluating the concept and thinking, how can I make this more fun for people? I want to give you something to come back for. So every 2 weeks you ideally tune in to hear what happens next. And also I want to give you a taste of my fantasy world, because this is about a side character from The Raven, from my debut novel. I think one of the first occasions I came upon this concept of publishing a story in parts, or a fiction story in parts, as a sort of series, was actually in art school, and it was about Charles Dickens, because I believe that he published his books originally as sort of follow-up stories, or serialized stories, I don't know the proper term, in a newspaper. And it would, one, I don't know, chapter, or maybe just a smaller part even of the book, would come out every week as a separate story, and people would just clamor over each other. Clamor? I don't know. They'd really be into the story and want to know what would happen next, and it was like a sort of mass hysteria to get to know what happened next. It was what you would talk about at the water cooler at work, without the water cooler, but you get that idea. And I remember hearing that and thinking, hell no. That's about as much pressure you can put yourself under as an author as I can think of. You're publishing a story that you haven't finished quite yet, or mostly that's not quite definitive while you're publishing it, parts of it, excuse me. And also, you get feedback from what will become fans while you're writing it, which can put a lot of pressure on you as a writer. If you take, for example, like a really well-known fandom like Sherlock Holmes, there are so many fan theories doing the rounds that it can really mess with your head as a writer, because you already have all those stories going around in your head, and you have all these loose ends that you have to tie together in some kind of way. It's just a really stressful situation. So why did I do it? That's a good question. I have to think. No, I'm just sort of lost my line there. No, why I did it is because I did those 4 stories and I realized, wow, I love this. It's the total juxtaposition to what I have been doing for the last over 10 years. I used to never share anything I wrote, and I used to never think it was good enough or even done. I used to go back and tweak it and keep tweaking it and never know when to stop. So what I've noticed is it's really good for my self-esteem as a writer and my confidence in my skill and ability. So yeah, it bolstered my confidence, and also is it a lot of fun. Because you get to play with all these elements of like a cliffhanger at the end and foreshadowing, but not so complicated that your listeners, will lose track of it while they're listening. So it's sort of giving me all sorts of new opportunities to explore my craft, which is really cool. And I'm not gonna lie, the release of the first episode has been really stressful. Another huge part of my publishing journey is mental health and how I have to guard it. I'm not the most stable person in that department without wanting to go too much in depth, but that has been a challenge. But on the other hand, it's given me so much energy, and the responses are so great that it's also really good for me. And I guess that's it. I'm super happy with it. I'm doing it because I wanted to challenge myself, and I want a direct way to connect with you, hopefully a reader/listener. I look forward to hearing what people's thoughts are on The Raven's Toll. I hope you will give this series a chance. Because, it's really amazing to be writing this and talking about this while it's happening, and I hope I can take you on this journey with me. So, if you're interested in all that, maybe consider subscribing to this channel, or, I don't know, to Spotify or Podbean or iTunes or wherever else you prefer to listen to the podcast. Next episode will be February 4th, so tune in for that. I'm gonna release it, I think, 7 a.m. GMT, so you get a chance to listen on your commute, but if that doesn't work out, I'm in a different time zone, so at least it will be up that day. And I look forward to your responses, and I hope you think this is as cool a concept as I think it is. Oh, that sounds so corny, but oh well, here we go. Thank you for listening to this video. I hope you enjoyed this sort of expose about me and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And if you have any questions, leave them below. I'm really curious to know what you want to know from a fantasy author. I hope to talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye!